This will be the last session that we do on the new RPA. I think after today, I think we'll have covered pretty much all the changes and gone through a lot of line by line items on the new RPA, including the grid section, which looks really daunting and confusing, I think, in the beginning, but once you start going through it line by line, I think everybody will see that it's really not too bad. It actually, I think, is, the more that I'm going through this contract and kind of teaching it and stuff like that, it's seeming to kind of simplify things actually a little bit. So I think I'm going to like the grid. So hopefully everybody else will get used to it pretty quickly as well. So just gonna give another minute or so to let everybody get on. Looks like we have a few more jumping on. So the rumor is that the new contract's going to be coming out this week. So Anna Heed had gone to a meeting. Was it last weekend or last week? I think last Tuesday, and they said they were going to be launching this on the 15th. So hopefully that's what's going on, so we can all get moving forward with this this new contract. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Probably run about 30 minutes again today. Maybe a little longer, but probably around 30 minutes. So, all right, so today we're going to cover sections of the grid, explanation of disclosures within the RPA, seller duty to disclose leases and liens, contingency for review of leases and liens, in-house technology, attached items, vesting change to buyer, assignments, initial deposits, occupancy and possession, seller credits, title insurance, and cancellations. So we'll start off with the grid section. This is, the newest part, probably the biggest change to the contract. This consists of 6 sections on the first 3 pages of the RPA. So this is where you're going to find terms and conditions, possession, documents, fees and compliance, items included and excluded in the sale, and allocation of costs. So here's kind of an overview of what the grid looks like. It's just the first 3 pages. After that, you just get into all the paragraphs, kind of explaining things. Now, one thing I like that they did with this is, if you'll notice, next to each, in the second column here, each line has, you can see where the paragraph is explaining that section. So if you wanted to find your appraisal contingency, you would look on page 2. L2 on the grid is the appraisal, and it's saying that 8B is where you'll find the appraisal contingency clause in the contract. So I think it's really nice that they're referencing the areas now, so it's going to be much easier to find different parts of the contract that you're looking for. So you can kind of start with the grid and then see where they're referencing that in the contract. So we'll do page 1 and 2 of the grid, features the terms and conditions of the offer. Section A, or line A, that's going to be the purchase price, the close of escrow, expiration of offer, initial deposit amount, or the EMD. If there's going to be any increased deposit amount, that's going to be in D2. Loan amounts, occupancy type, balance down payment. And we've got a new section here, seller credit to buyer, if applicable. Additional finance terms, verification of all cash, verification of down payment or proof of funds, and verification of loan application, which is going to be your pre-qual or your pre-approval letter. Page 2 of the grid is the contingencies section of the offer. So they're all together now, which is kind of nice. It's not, you know, spread about. The first one's going to be the loan. Then we have appraisal, investigations and access, review of seller documents, preliminary title report, common interest disclosures, review of leased and liened items, and if there's a sale of buyer's property. This is going to work the same as kind of the other contracts. So if, you know, on L8, if there is a contingency for the sale of the buyer's property, you're going to check the box that's going to attach that form. So when you're if you see any other boxes like that within the contract, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to check the box, it's going to attach the form. So it's going to pop up in your zip forms file. Next up, page 2 of the RPA also features the possession terms of the offer. So when the buyer or tenants are going to be vacating the property. So this is lines M. So time of possession, the default setting is upon recordation, not, I think the current one was end of day. Now they're saying upon recordation. So if your clients are expecting to be there by, you know, stay until the end of the day, if you're on the listing side, and this thing records in the morning, keep that in mind. Be sure to check those boxes accordingly. Seller occupied. So if there's going to be an SIP or a lease after the sale, then that's where this goes. And the tenant occupied. So if the tenant's going to remain in possession, you're going to check the form, check the box, and then that's going to include the form for tenant in possession. Page 2 also has the document fees and compliance section. So delivery, seller delivery of documents, sign and deliver escrow instructions, time to pay fees for HOA documents, smoke alarm, CO2, water heater bracing, and evidence of representative authority. So we covered that last week. That would be the RCSD. That's kind of going away a little bit. It's still going to be available, but they've incorporated it more into this contract. You'll also notice smoke alarm, CO2, water heater bracing. It's stating that those are going to be done. I'll go back to that real quick. 7 days after acceptance. So make sure your sellers are on board with that. If you notice, you know, while you're on your listing appointment, or if you're doing your Avid right then, and they're missing any of those items, they're going to need to get those fixed right away. They have 7 days from the new contract. All right, so page 3 of the grid, or page 3 of the offer, actually. So this is the items to be included and excluded. Items such as appliances, security items, smart home items, and other items. You'll notice that bathroom mirrors are now defaulted to be included. You may have run into it in the past. I don't know why, but a lot of sellers, if they have like a decorative bathroom mirror, they thought that they could take that because it wasn't attached in their opinion. So now it's defaulted. So if the seller is thinking that they want to take their decorative bathroom mirrors, you need to make sure you're putting that on your counter offer, stating it in the MLS, so on and so forth. P2 is the excluded items. If you are going to have any, you'd put them here. The last section is on page 3 still. This is the allocation of costs. So this is your natural hazard report, smoke alarm, CO2, you know, who's paying for that. Government required point of sale inspections and reports. Government required point of sale corrective remediation or remedial actions. escrow fees, owner's title policy, the buyer's lender title policy, county transfer tax, city transfer tax, HOA fee for preparing disclosures. There's no box on this. You'll notice that this is defaulted to the seller. So while on your listing appointments, be sure that you're noting that, or that you're changing it on your counter offers. HOA cert, this is defaulted to the buyer. HOA transfer fees, they do give an option for buyer or seller on those. Private transfer fees, we don't really see this too much. Miscellaneous other fees, if you have any, this is where you would put them. Home warranty plan is down towards the bottom. And then if you have any other terms, this is where you're putting it now in R. So that's going to be the bottom of page 3. So explanation of disclosures within the RPA. So they're doing a little bit better job explaining these. Section 11 of the RPA covers the non-waivable statutory disclosures and other minor disclosures. So the non-waivable statutory disclosures, that's going to be your real estate transfer disclosure statement, TDS. That's going to be your NHD. That's going to be your seller property questionnaire, your SPQ, or your exempt seller disclosure, if that applies. You have to remember that anytime a TDS is required, the SPQ is also required. Fire hardening and defensible space. This is becoming more and more prominent. Lead-based paint. You'll notice they did change the name on that doc, so it's LPD now and not FLD. The minor disclosures, all other contingencies can be removed or waived. So those previous ones here, the non-waivables, these cannot be waived. They're a part of every contract or transaction. Removal or waiver of the contingencies with offer. Buyer shall have no obligation to remove a contractual contingency unless the seller has provided all required documents, reports, disclosures, and information pertaining to that contingency. If buyer does remove a contingency without first receiving all required information from the seller, the buyer is relinquishing their contractual rights and apply to that contingency. Leased and liened items. So this is in section 9B6 within the time specified in paragraph 3N1 of the RPA. The seller shall disclose to buyer if any item or system specified in paragraph 3P or 9B or otherwise included in the sale is leased, meaning it's not owned by the seller, or has ongoing financial obligation or specifically subject to a lien or other encumbrance or loan, and delivered to the buyer within all written materials such as lease warranty, financing, etc., concerning and such items. So, you know, this is going to pertain to solar panels, could be propane tanks, could be water softening or reverse osmosis systems. Sometimes those are leased, things like that. So you'll see this is the section 9B6, talks about the leased and liened items. All right, contingency for review of leased and liened items. So review timeline of leased and liened items such as solar panels, propane tanks, water softening systems, PACE HARO liens is located in the grid section of the RPA. It's going to be L7, and the default time period is 17 days to review those. This is definitely going to become more of a thing as well because there's just more and more solar going in, and that's probably the biggest thing right now that needs to be really reviewed is in terms of those, you know, the PACE and HARO liens and things like that. Contingency descriptions are located on page 6 of the RPA in sections 8G, 9B6. So this is where the paragraphs are. In-house technology. Obviously, this is becoming more prominent as well. You know, Ring doorbells, security systems, things like that, even the little Wi-Fi cameras. You know, they added these into the contract, which I think is good. So section P, or 3P of the grid, references in-house technology such as smart home security devices that are not to convey with the sale. So you'll see in the centers where they have those. Sections 9B3, 4, and 5 of the RPA describes what is encompassed. So I would take a minute, go down to that section, and they kind of line item everything that is included in that. Suggestion: if you're unable or unsure as to if the home has any of the items noted in 3P but want devices to convey with the sale if they're available, check off the applicable boxes and let the seller counter offer what does not convey with the sale. Sometimes it's hard to tell in some of these homes, especially with all the in-house cameras and everything. So I would check off all the boxes if you're just not sure, if it's not stated in NMLS, and then let the seller counter offer them. Attached items. So unless otherwise agreed, all items specified in 3P2 are excluded from the sale. So unless you're checking the boxes, they're not conveying. Audio and video components, such as flat screen TV, speakers, etc., that itself is not attached to the property, even if a bracket or other mechanism attached to the component is attached to the property, is excluded. So they have some clarity on that now, because there would be confusion as the TV is attached to the bracket, which is attached to the wall, therefore it conveys. They're saying now that doesn't. It would be the bracket itself that would convey. Furniture and other items, dressers, wall units, etc., secured to the property for earthquake safety purposes are excluded. That's come up before too. Hey, the dresser is screwed into the wall, therefore it's attached. They're saying no, that is not now. Or actually, they clarified it is what they did. Again, back to the bathroom mirrors real quick. Just remember, unless otherwise agreed, it is defaulted. That checkbox is already checked on the contract, so they are conveying. Vesting change to buyer. So buyer shall have the right to assign all of buyer's interest in this agreement to buyer's own trust or to a wholly owned entity of the buyer that is in existence at the time of such assignment. We'll go back to that real quick. So this is section 23, if you want to read that a little bit, but this is a little bit of a change as well, mostly pertaining to trusts. Initial buyer must disclose any consideration paid. So prior to any assignment, the buyer shall disclose to the seller the name of the assignee and the amount of any monetary consideration between buyer and assignee. So for those of you that are getting a contract into, or getting a property in a contract and then looking to assign that out and making a fee, that needs to be disclosed now. Buyer shall provide assignee with all documents related to the agreement, including any disclosures. So anything that's been received by the first purchaser needs to be provided to the assignee. If assignee is a wholly owned entity or trust of the buyer, the assignee does not need to re-sign or initial all documents provided. So if it's a buyer and they're assigning it to their trust, they don't need to re-sign everything again. But if it's a buyer and they're assigning this to someone else, then they need to go and re-sign everything, contract, disclosures, everything again. So that's sign and initial everything. Whether or not an assignment requires seller's consent at the time of assignment, assignee shall deliver a letter from the assignee's lender that the assignee is pre-qualified or pre-approved as specified in paragraph 6B. Should the assignee fail to deliver such a letter, seller, after first giving the assignee a notice to perform, shall have the right to terminate the assignment. All right, initial buyer obligations and seller remedies. So buyer shall, within the time specified in paragraph 3K, deliver any request to assign the agreement for the seller's consent. So by default, we're looking at 17 days here. Initial buyer obligations and seller remedies. If buyer fails to provide the required information within this time frame, seller's withholding of consent shall be deemed reasonable. This is the bottom line here, paragraph 23. Any total or partial assignment shall not relieve buyer of buyer's obligations pursuant to this agreement unless otherwise agreed by the seller. So just because this is being assigned to another entity or buyer, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't relinquish the original buyer from the obligation. So if the assignee defaults on the contract in some sort of way, it's going to fall back again on the original purchaser. So keep that in mind. Initial deposit to be deposited into escrow within 3 business days. If you remember from, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe the first one we did, it's business days. This is the only time it's referenced as business days. Everything else is calendar days. So EMD hasn't really changed. It's business days from acceptance date. It is defaulted to wire transfer still as well. Stating that it's to be deposited directly to escrow holder. So again, we want to try and stay away from collecting checks and all this other things. Put your client, the buyer, in contact with escrow, have them handle the transfer of those funds. It's just a much safer way to do it. If a method other than a wire transfer is specified in 3D1 in the grid section, and such method is unacceptable to the escrow holder, then upon notice from escrow holder, delivery shall be by wire transfer. So they're really pushing the wire transfer. Occupancy and possession. So section E3 of the grid is where occupancy type is stated. It's going to be either primary is the default, and now they have secondary or investment. So you can check now if it's going to be a second home or if it's going to be an investment purchase if it's not the primary. Time of possession is stated in the grid section. That's section M. Seller credit. I'm actually glad they added this one in. This is in the grid section, section G1. The default of the credit is to be applied towards closing costs. So, you know, I think everybody was probably writing this into other terms previously. So now they have a line item for it if there is going to be one. I know it's not super prominent right now in the market, but this will come back around and it does still happen. You don't have to rewrite this again or reiterate it anywhere in the contract. This is the section where you put it. Title insurance. Contingency for buyer to obtain title insurance is located on page 6, section 8E of the RPA. By default, the buyer has 5 days to review the preliminary title report. The type of title policy to be issued and other provisions are located in section 13 of the RPA, lines A through G. Cancellation comes up a lot. This is where you find the provisions for this. So pertaining to the seller's right to cancel are in paragraph 14C of the RPA, numbers 1 through 3. Provisions pertaining to the buyer's right to cancel are in 14D of the RPA, numbers 1 through 3. So I would take a few minutes. Cancellations are like probably one of the number one, maybe number two call that I get questions on all the time. Take a few minutes, read through the seller's right to cancel and the buyer's right to cancel. It's pretty cut and dry how it's handled, but all the information is there. Check that out. Disclosure regarding potential loss of deposit is located in paragraph 29 of the RPA in the liquidated damages clause. So this is where they're putting the buyer on notice that there is a potential that they are going to lose their deposit if they default. Mutual instructions required for cancellation expressed in paragraph 14H. So again, takes two signatures, buyer and seller, for the cancellation. And that's about it. So if anybody has any questions, you can throw them in the chat. This will be the last one I do on this. This is rolling out in a couple days. So check on Wednesday. Check your zip forms if you want to see the new RPA. Maybe you want to fill out one just to kind of go through it a few times. Like I said before, I think the biggest thing is just take your time on your first few offers. Most of it's the same, it's just in different places. Pay, go line by line, especially in the grid section. That's where you're gonna be filling in most of your terms, conditions, timelines, all that stuff. So go line by line, don't try and rush through it so you don't miss anything. And we have one question. It says, can you run through the grid on who typically pays for each box? Yeah, I think so. Let's see. Back here. So I think Dean is referencing the allocation of cost section. So allocation of costs, this is who pays what. This is section Q of the grid. So I guess we'll just go in reverse. How about that? So other terms is down at the bottom. Yep. Right. There we go. Home warranty plan. So remember, this used to be like scattered all around the contract. So just, everything for the allocation of costs is in one section now. So you can just go line by line and tick off who is paying for what. The only thing is the HOA, the doc prep and the certification fee. Those already have a default. They don't have the ability to check buyer or seller. Everything else is check buyer, seller, both, so on and so forth. I'm not sure on the natural hazard if they're going to be where they have a little drop down to pick your service provider. I'm gonna guess they're still gonna have that, but maybe not. So I guess we'll find out on Wednesday if they're still doing that. Same thing with the home warranty plan, if they're gonna have the drop down box, to pick your service provider. I'm actually not sure. I haven't seen that yet. Maybe someone else has. The 16 and 17 is just miscellaneous, private transfer fees, HOA. So hopefully that answers your question, Dean. So just run through those real quick. If there's no other questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up right about on time. If you guys want to go through an offer together, once this comes out, first time writing it, let me know. We can jump on a Zoom or something, or if you want to shoot it over to me. Obviously, this will be my first time going through it as well, but I can definitely put it, second set of eyes on it if you want to shoot me your offer before sending it off once we get this new RPA rolled out. So other than that, hope everybody has a great week, and give me a call if you need anything.